What's up, friends? I'm your host, Amanda Smith, and welcome to the Girl Gang podcast, the show where I chat with inspiring women about business, life's challenges, and building community, because we all need it. If you need a girl gang, this podcast is for you. Boss Vision Conference is coming October 23rd this year in person in Dallas, Texas. You do not want to miss this one-day experience of panels, networking, solo speakers, keynotes, breakout sessions, you name it. This is the experience we all need and have been waiting for since 2020. Grab your ticket at bossvisioncon.com and we'll see you there. All right, guys, welcome to the Girl Gang podcast. Today we have Miss Katie Beal Brown, and she is the founder of Lone River Ranch Water. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Good. Thank you so much for having me on.
So excited. Well, for those who don't know or haven't been in a grocery store in a while, tell us who you are and what you do and about your amazing company.
So, Katie Beal Brown, I founded a company called Lone River Beverage Company, and we are the makers of ranch water, which you can find in most grocery stores. We're actually expanding nationally as I speak. So before Labor Day, you should be able to find us in every state across the country. And we are currently the number one ranch water product in America.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I have tried the product. It is amazing. It's delicious. So let's take it back. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about you and kind of what is your background and how did you end up doing this today and having, now being the face of a company and managing people and now like growing this brand across the nation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in West Texas. My family's been out there for hundreds of years. And my grandparents actually have a working ranch in far West Texas. So it's kind of really deeply rooted in who I am and where I grew up, and all of my family is still there. And we've been drinking the ranch water cocktail out there for as long as I can remember. And for a period of time after I got married, I actually moved away from Texas to New York, and I was really homesick. Obviously, it was a big change going to such a big city. And I constantly used ranch water almost as a way to share a little bit more about myself and where I come from with people. Because a lot of times when I would mention the town that I grew up in, I would get blank stares. Nobody had any idea, what it was or where it was. And so I found ranch water to be like an interesting way to just share a little bit of the culture of West Texas and where I grew up. So, as I was in New York, I was building a career in advertising. And at one point, I started to see some of the hard seltzers come into the market. The first one was originally called spiked seltzer. And as I introduced ranch water, the cocktail, to a lot of my friends in New York, I always got such a great response and people wanted to know more. And then they started introducing their friends to it. And so as I started to see this hard seltzer trend emerge, the wheels were turning for me and saying, what if we actually packaged ranch water, similar to what the hard seltzers were doing, and brought it to the market and really built a brand around it to tell the story of where it comes from. And so at the advertising agency I was working at the time, I applied to be a part of this incubator program, and it was almost like a Shark Tank competition, and I won. And out of that just really gave me a lot of momentum to say, okay, maybe this idea is bigger than just something in my head, but something that other people think could be something. And so that's what started the journey. And then it has been certainly a wild ride to where we are today, and one that I could have never expected.
I'm sure not. So let's get a little timeline going here. So when did you officially launch Lone River Ranch Water?
So we had concepted it for several years and formulated it and worked on it before it actually launched, but we launched in spring of 2020. So we actually launched
Yeah.
April 17th. It was the peak of the global pandemic. Um, there was so much uncertainty. Every part of our supply chain at one point was completely disrupted. We didn't
Yeah.
even know if we were going to have the proper selling permits because all of the government offices were closed. And so we honestly
Yeah.
got into the market by the skin of our teeth. And we were looking at ourselves saying, like, the shelves are being cleared of booze. Like, we have to get it out there now, but can we do it? And so somehow we actually did. And we didn't know at first. Our distributors were really hesitant to give us any commitment, and it just
Mm.
started flying off the shelf. And so from that point forward, it became this game of catching up and trying to make more and more and kind of reinvent parts of our supply chain. And that's really, I think our journey has been a lot of just continued momentum. And so
Mm-hmm.
um that's kind of what led us to then, later in the year, we started to put up really big sales numbers. And I think the industry just took notice because they hadn't seen that kind of disruption in a while.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and so that's what then started to attract potential partners, like our partner today, which is Diageo, which is the largest spirits
Mm-hmm.
company in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yes.
amazing. So I have a question. All the logistics of this to me would be like a nightmare. I would be like, never mind. I don't want to do this anymore. This sounds really crazy. So I shop at Kroger. There's a local Kroger here where we live in like the Forney area, and it is a massive Kroger. And they have the best like end cap or displays set up for like showcase products. And they
Yep.
always do a really good job of showcasing your product. So for you, how does this is such a dumb question, but how does that get decided? Like, do you communicate with your suppliers on like what does it need to be on an end cap? Like, what does it need to look like?
Yeah.
Things like that.
I mean, I guess this isn't so I didn't have any experience in the alcohol industry at all. Like, my background was marketing. And
Right.
so the
Which
whole
helps, but
I really had such an elementary knowledge of how everything worked that our first hire, which was our VP of sales, looking back, the questions I was asking him, he must have been saying to himself, "Wow, like she really does not know anything at all." And so, it's interesting because so in alcohol, after prohibition, there was what they call a three-tier system established. So we actually sell our product to a distributor, and then the distributor sells it to a retailer like Kroger. So there's
right.
kind of this
Okay.
intermediary. But to get it on the shelf at Kroger, so there's 2 times of year that they kind of reset their shelf and they get new products in. And so we were really racing to, so those happen in spring and fall. So the reason why that launch date was so critical is because we had timed it with that spring, they call it a reset. And so that's what allowed us to, our first customer was actually HEB. That's what allowed us to get into HEB.
Amazing.
Um, and so, but yes, I think it's just on my journey, it's been just funny to look back and say, wow, like I really had no idea what I was getting into.
so Kroger essentially, or whoever the store is, gets to choose like what they're rotating out. Like they always have some kind of like crazy Topo Chico
Yep.
display, I feel like. And then they just like cycle through different things. I just wonder, I'm always curious, like, who makes these decisions?
Yeah.
Like from you, the founder, to the product ending up in my grocery cart.
Well, and that's where like I became a bit of a salesperson because we
Mm,
were, on this kind of virtual roadshow of presenting ranch water to these buyers. And then
mm-hmm.
they were deciding from that pitch if they thought it was a proposition that consumers would actually want.
Yeah.
Fortunately, for us, a lot of people made an early bet and they said, I do think consumers will want this. And
Yeah.
so it just gave us, again, kind of the momentum and really a shot to see if it could work.
How did it feel? This may be a weird question. How did it feel launching this in April of 2020 when the world felt like it was ending, but you as a business owner, like you really needed to capitalize on this momentum to be like get it out there and get the success that you wanted. How did that feel? Because to me, I would be like, oh my gosh, do we do this? It's a pandemic. Is this the right time?
Yeah.
Like, should we take advantage of this? Should I not? What was like the process for you in making those choices?
So I think because of the nature and the context of everything that's happened in the first year of us being in business,
Mm-hmm.
like I've had to deal with a lot of decisions that a lot of entrepreneurs and founders probably don't even have to think about for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And even like, do we tell our workforce that they are not going into the market anymore? Is it safe for them? When is it safe?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think there were times, for example, we had flown from New York out to West Texas at my ranch. We flew there on March 3rd. And when we got there, we were doing a shoot to capture all of the assets for our launch. And right at the end of the shoot, it was like on the verge of lockdown. And so the last shoot day, we were looking at each other and we were saying, should we just scrap it and say, like, let's not do it? And we decided to push through. And fortunately, everybody got home safely. But I think there were so many decisions like that, um, that, it was really hard and it was very dynamic. And I sought counsel from a lot of different people because not only was I a completely new leader, but I just was learning an entirely new industry and trying to navigate it during the most disruptive period probably of all time. Um,
Yeah.
and I know some brands, they missed that window to launch.
Mm-hmm.
And then, their launch was pushed out by, 4 or 6 months. And if that had happened to us, I think we would have been on a much different trajectory. So part of it is I think that there's been something much bigger than me and us in this whole process that is kind of unexplainable. Um, in that, a lot of things came together in the right way to make it happen. And some of it was because we were smart and strategic, and some of it was just a little bit of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody, like, you're right. You have had to probably make decisions and choices that would not normally come until like year 5 or, or ever, because
Yeah.
like a global pandemic happens, well, I don't know how often, like not often, and that feels to me would be incredibly stressful, because I also would be wondering, like, I think there's this part, I think also as women, sometimes we feel bad
Yeah.
about trying to get ahead, or like, I want to say win, but you're not winning. But, we feel bad about taking advantage of something.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like, I'm growing a business. You had been doing R&D on this product for what you said, like 2 years.
Yeah. And I think I love what you're saying because just thinking back to how I was feeling during that time
Mm-hmm.
period, I had just seen a ton of my old agency colleagues get laid off, no
Oh
job,
gosh.
nowhere to go. And here I am, like after a few months, kind of succeeding. And I did feel guilty, but I think in a way I had to really compartmentalize things because I think that first year, it was just about laser focus and true survival in every sense of the word. Probably, and that's not unique to me, but I think that was really how I looked at it from a business perspective too.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, we can feel like, again, just like those questions of like the I guess it's a little bit of like the ethics of it, or just like you said, feeling bad, but also like we shouldn't feel bad for bringing a product to people that we love and building a business, you know. And
Yeah.
like you said, you felt bad because you had, you know, left the agency and all your friends were getting laid off. But now you actually, you know, it's kind of cool because what if you could hire some of them to come help you, you know, or
Well,
um,
and ironically, we actually now are a client of theirs,
that's amazing.
which was amazing to kind of come full circle. And
How
the
serendipitous.
other thing I'll add to it, and I think that really impacted my mindset, is our investors were only our friends and family. We didn't take any institutional funding. So for me,
Amazing.
because of that, and I had to look my parents, my sisters, our friends in the face and, tell them like if we were going to make it or not, there was no option for failure. Could not lose their money. And so
Yeah.
that was a real driving force for me, in that
Wow.
just there was no way in my mind I was going to let them down.
So this is a whole other world too, and I've talked a lot about this with like my coaching clients who are female business owners running their own business and like working with family. And it's not like you're totally employing your whole family, but they're involved in this brand and
Yeah.
in this business. And like you said, like you had to tell them, hey, we're doing great, or we may be shit out of luck, or, you know,
I
something's
mean, there was
happening.
a real like risk that I would lose all the
Yeah.
money. And like that to me was, I think the fear of that was the most motivating factor in the whole
Oh, for
thing,
sure.
because I just, at one point both my sisters were pregnant and they had
Oh
invested
gosh.
so much in the business. It wasn't an option. I had to at least get them their money back. And fortunately, you know, I think our story, you know, was very hopeful for a lot of people because we were able to do that.
Yeah. Wow. And was it a hard decision to, you know, initially say, yes, I want to take investors that are my family?
I think, as we were starting, it just seemed like the most natural
Pretty
group,
natural.
because part of it is I didn't want the pressure of, outside investors or institutional funding, because we
Hmm.
really did not know what was going to happen.
Sure.
Um, but then I think what I underestimated is the pressure of it being people that are so close to you. And I feel like that's almost worse if it doesn't succeed. Because you have to
Yeah,
live with
for
that.
sure.
You live with them for the rest of your life.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
Yep.
Oh man, that's like very brave and bold, but also like you said, I was thinking this must have felt really natural to move forward with this, which I think is fantastic. I don't know many people that can do family and business really well. I have one client who her mother and her sister work for her, and she has a big warehouse and they do physical products of like planners and stickers and they've been going at it for 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's just like incredible to be able to really like be so solid with your family and know your boundaries and be able to like be business savvy and then like leave business with business and family with family.
Yep.
And I think that's just fantastic. I love it.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
it's been like an interesting environment for me too, because in this whole process, I also had a baby.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
when the product launched, she was about 1, and we had to get really resourceful, and our parents became like, the people we could rely on for childcare. And I think it's
Yeah.
created like, you know, a very dynamic environment between my husband and myself, and how we, handle the responsibilities as a whole. Um, but I think that's been another layer to it as well. And something that,
Yeah.
quite frankly, I think will always be very dynamic and in some ways challenging, because, it is a job, I guess, that requires a lot. And it's not maybe a traditional job that a new mom would have.
Yeah. Wow, you keep uncovering all these things like, oh yeah, and there was family, and then I had a baby, and my sisters were pregnant, and like, oh my gosh, that just feels. I think there's something to be said about entrepreneurs that I've talked about a lot lately with people. It feels like I feel like we get into business and it's crazy as it is, and then for our type of personality, it's like, what's a little more chaos, Like we're like, it's fine. Like this is all already happening. Why not do, this next big life thing?
Right. Totally. And I mean, so much to the extent that like, we are actually still living with our parents a year and a half
I
after
love it.
and it's like at this point, a lot of our friends are like, why? And we are actually going to move soon, but it was the only way that we could make this all work. And fortunately, we had that option.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of the stuff that people see the highlight reel and the big milestones, but they don't really understand the sacrifices and what it took to get there. And I think that is something that is important to focus on sometimes because it does take a lot of sacrifice.
It absolutely does. I mean, this last year, my husband and I decided I was a teacher for 7 years and I had been running my business and teaching full time. And it was time for me to leave. I couldn't do this anymore. So I decided to leave. He decided to become a teacher. Then we decided to buy a house and there was a pandemic going on and our lease was ending. So we lived with our parents for, I think it was only supposed to be 2 months, but then of course, in this time, housing is crazy and supplies are low. So, we were there for 3-4 months but it was like, that's how we have to do things now, like our parents' generations and generations before, like life was just completely different. And so you do what you have to do and who cares? Like you said, everybody sees the highlight reel, but also I think something that's important to me and our brand and our show is like being authentic and just being yourself and saying like, I think sometimes if we talk about those things publicly, we'll think, oh, people will judge me for that. But, everybody has a story and, why does it matter what we're doing? So I think that's absolutely incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Well, what can we look forward to with the brand coming up and how can people connect with you guys?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is our national launch, which was a dream of mine that I didn't think we would realize for years. And here we are. And
That
then
was fast.
we also have a new campaign coming out that really celebrates the culture of West Texas and Texas. And
I love it.
I'm excited to see what people think about that. But yeah, and then, beyond that, we have some new innovation in the pipeline. And I think it'll be a really exciting and telling year to see how big, this can really get and what we can do to keep disrupting a category.
That's so exciting. So cool. Well, I know West Texas has a little bit of a place in my heart. My whole family most of my family went to tech. My dad grew up in Lubbock. So West Texas roots run deep. And it's absolutely awesome. So thank you for sharing your story today. I love what you're doing. And congratulations on this massive success and in the national campaign. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.